Good evening and welcome. Tonight we'll be going over the history and geography of Honduras. Honduras is located in Central America. Let me move book out of the way. As always, we'll go over book after we go over geography and history so we can see some pictures. Honduras is bordered by Guatemala, El Salvador, all down here, and Nicaragua. You can see the Rio Coco making up the border here with Nicaragua. Honduras is an incredibly mountainous country. As you can see here, nearly the whole entire country is covered in mountains. But when you get mountains, that means you get spaces between the mountains, which means you get valleys. So in between the mountains, inside the valleys, you have lots of rivers, which means you have lots of rich farmland, which means you have lots of cities and towns in between the mountains. So that is why we have the capital city of Tegucigalpa right here in the middle of all these wonderful mountains. Now, since it is in Central America, there are quite a bit of volcanoes down mainly in this area over here. But not nearly as many as in other countries in Central America. The highest point in Honduras is called Cerro Las Minas. It's located just down about here or so. And as we head north to the coastline here, this is the Caribbean Sea. You can see that it really slopes down toward the water. And that's where you mainly get like ranching, that kind of farming. Still lots of planting and things, but we'll talk about that in its history. San Pedro Sula is the next major city in this area, followed by La Ceiba here on the coast. Of course, coastal cities are always very important, especially for where Honduras exports all its things to. And then out here in the ocean, you can see Islas de la Bahia, or the Bay Islands. And these are some very beautiful islands that belong to Honduras. They have some incredible coral reefs, and lots of tourists love to come here. It's pretty much like how you would imagine a Caribbean island to be. That's what these islands are like. Honduras has lots of other little islands out here in the Caribbean, and it also has some islands down here in the Gulf of Fonseca. In the Pacific Ocean, it has this little tiny bit of the Pacific Ocean. It shares this gulf with El Salvador. But not all of Honduras is incredibly mountainous. We have this region over here, which is mainly known as the Mosquito Coast. And it still has its fair share of mountains, but it is absolutely covered in thick, jungly rainforest. There's actually a big nature reserve in this area here to protect it, and it is very sparsely populated. As you can see, there's pretty much no towns at all in this whole part. This is where the majority of the native population of Hondurans live. Many different native tribes in this area, living some tribes just as they always have been out in the jungles. It's very beautiful, and like I said, I'll show you some pictures in this book. So let's just dive right in and talk about Honduras, because there's one other thing I want to show you, and it's geography, but it involves its early history. Like I was saying, there were many different native peoples living in this area long ago. The majority, or the largest ethnic group in its early history, were known as the Lenca people, who are still around. They're still a dominant. I think they're currently the largest native population in Honduras, if I am correct. But the dominant one in the early 600, 700, 800, 900s would be the Mayans, which we talked about in my video about Guatemala, because that was where they were predominantly living. But of course, they didn't have these borders back then, so some of their territory was in Honduras. And one of their very major cities was Copan. You can see right here. Very famous ruins in Honduras. Probably, definitely like top 3 famous Mayan ruins in Central America. But just like all the other Mayan cities, it was abandoned, and nobody knows why. It's very interesting ruins in that there's a famous staircase that's covered with hieroglyphs that talk a lot about their Mayan culture and history. It's a really interesting site, one of the big tourist spots in Honduras. So Christopher Columbus very famously sailed along the coast here. I'll talk about it in here because there's quotes in here. He's believed to have named Honduras when he landed down here in what's now Trujillo. And many Spanish conquistadors came through Honduras, and their conquest of this territory, Gil Gonzalez Davila was one of them. Hernan Cortez came down from Mexico to invade, and Cristobal de Olid is probably one of the more infamous ones. There was a big resistance movement against the Spanish. They were led by a man named Lempira, who was essentially like the big national hero of Honduras. They've named their currency after him, and obviously he's on the Lempira, like $1 bill, like one Lempira bill has Lempira on it. He was a massive figure. He sadly lost his battle and he was killed by the Spanish, but extremely beloved figure in Honduras. And slowly but surely the Spanish took over the territory and they made it part of the Kingdom of Guatemala. Its capital in Guatemala City, but they established a lot of the towns here you can see in Honduras. Interestingly, very interesting to note, however, wow, I can't talk. The Spanish did not manage to defeat the Mosquito people who lived in this region over here. The jungle's too thick. They managed to hold back against the Spanish and not be conquered by their weapons or disease or anything like that. So silver was discovered in the mountains here, and it was very heavily mined thanks to native Hondurans and people who were kidnapped from Africa and brought over. And it wasn't all just silver mining and Spanish control. There was also an issue of pirates in the area, particularly up here in the islands and along the coastline over here. Since this whole section was pretty much ignored since it was all jungle, the pirates came around that area and hung out. And also the British, because the British and pirates at one point in history were like this, right? So the British started to lay claim to the Mosquito Coast. The Spanish were not very happy about that. But there wasn't much they can do because at that point the British had the upper hand in history. Eventually, Spain would lose its control over Central America, and Honduras, along with many other nations in Central America, declared its independence on September 15th, 1821. For a brief moment, they were part of the First Mexican Empire until 1823. And then they unified as one unit with Guatemala, El Salvador, Nicaragua, and Costa Rica. But it didn't quite work out. It fell apart after a few decades. Honduras was the one country that really, really tried to bring all the countries together and keep them from falling apart. They really tried to maintain that united Central America, but it did not work out in the end. And pretty much every other country in Central America had their own thing going. Like they had their own thing to grow and export, you know, their own ways of making a name for themselves. But Honduras did not really have much. They really just had land. So they had an idea to lease out some of this land to farming companies, particularly American fruit companies. And bananas started to become planted around the 1870s. And the Americans really took advantage of this, right? Because they controlled the fruit plantations, they controlled the land. So eventually American troops were stationed in Honduras just to make sure everything was going smoothly, controlling the economy and the infrastructure of their plantations, and thus controlling the country in a sense. the American author O. Henry coined the term banana republic when he wrote a story that was based on Honduras and how the country was being ran. Essentially, the fruit companies were controlling the entire nation in a nutshell. There are a lot of little things happening in Honduras' history politically. There were quite a few minor civil wars and political skirmishes, dictators taking control, and things like that. There were many strikes in the 1950s, and there was a military coup in 1963. But the most dominant one, or the most infamous one, I should say, was the 1969 football war that they waged briefly with El Salvador. It started when the number of Salvadoran legal immigrants into Honduras was beginning to, disrupt Honduras. And after some World Cup preliminary matches, Honduras versus El Salvador, tensions ran high and it turned into an all-out war, which thankfully was abruptly ended by the United Nations and many other powers who did not want a full-on war happening here between these nations. And the United States did have a very heavy presence in Honduras during this time, mainly because they were helping the El Salvador government squash the rebel guerrilla movements happening there, and they were assisting Nicaragua with their sort of civil war that was happening. They were assisting the Contra fighters, helping the government, and they're basically stationed in Honduras at that time. It is important to note that even though there was all of this United States presence in Honduras, the economy of Honduras was really struggling. Honduras is still considered the poorest nation in Central America. I think they are the poorest nation in Central America. Many people living in poverty, with high unemployment, things like that. Even though the fruit companies have such a grasp on the economy, it's the very, very high ups with all the money and the very, very low people with no money. A huge income inequality gap there. So that's why a lot of the unrest was happening, as you can imagine. So I'm editing right now, and I completely forgot to mention a very important event in Honduran history. And I could have sworn while I was filming this that I did say it, but apparently I didn't. So in 1998, Hurricane Mitch hit Honduras, and it completely devastated the country. It wiped out pretty much all their crops, homes destroyed, lives lost. It was an incredibly devastating event to Honduras, one that the country has long struggled to recover from. So anyway, on that sad note, let's get back to the video. In 2009, there was a coup where the president, Manuel Zelaya, wanted to make changes to the constitution. Pretty much everyone in the government disagreed with that, and they basically, from what I read, they kidnapped him in the night and dropped him off in Costa Rica. And I know. And a lot of powers outside, like the UN and things like that in the United States, were like, you can't do that, that's a coup. And the Honduran government was like, it's fine, don't worry, we're fixing it, it's fine, it's totally legal, it's not a coup. Which was later ruled as a coup. But very interestingly, in November 2021, Honduras elected their new president. It's their first woman president. Her name is Xiomara Castro, and she is the wife of Manuel Zelaya, who was removed from his office. So now he's the first gentleman of Honduras. And essentially that's where Honduras is today. Honduras is still very much struggling economically. There's still a huge income inequality, and they still export bananas like crazy. Pretty much if you eat a banana, if you live in America like I do, high chance it was grown in Honduras. So let's flip through the book and, excuse my voice, sorry. Let's flip through the book and look at some pictures of Honduras. Let's see what we've got here. Some of the beautiful mountainy jungle you can see up here. This guy right here has some cassava. He's growing here in the ground. There's a very sweet toucan. This is Copan. Some of the very beautiful, mysterious ancient ruins here. And these guys have some bananas. Here's an archaeological excavation of Copan, looking at these beautiful ruins here. And here's a political map of Honduras. You can see the big reserve right there. And many, many of the cities over here. And beautiful, beautiful scenery here. This is a tobacco farm, it says. And here's some coconuts on the beach. This is a picture from the football war. And here is Christopher Columbus. So he said, Gracias a Dios que hemos salido de estas Honduras. Or, thank God we've escaped these depths. That's apparently how Honduras got its name. Here's Pico Bonito. It's very bonito. And this is in San Pedro Sula. Beautiful Spanish church there. This is the Choluteca River. So you can see river. Makes the grass green and fertile between the mountains here. And here are some freshly picked oranges. And let's see, this is the forest in the northeastern coast, it says. And here's a physical map of Honduras. That's where you can see Cerro Las Minas, the highest point, and lots of the rivers and mountains and stuff. There's a beautiful waterfall. And this is Lake Yohoa, the biggest lake in Honduras. Oh, this guy's yard flooded in the rains. That's no good. And this was after Hurricane Mitch. So I really didn't stress enough how Hurricane Mitch really devastated the country. It was really bad. It basically destroyed everything about the country. I think in a way they're still recovering from it. Here's a big jaguar. And a sweet little cappuccino monkey. An iguana hanging out of the tree. And the national mammal, it is the Yucatan white-tailed deer. Now this is a tapir, but it is a Baird's tapir. It's basically like the biggest tapir of them all. They look really kind of like pig-like, I guess. And there's some ox pulling some wood here in this cart. This guy is spraying to kill the mosquitoes. And this is a Julia butterfly. It's entirely orange. This bird is a Montezuma oropendola, and this is its nest. Isn't that interesting? It looks very precarious. And a very sweet scarlet macaw. I love those birds. Some of the beautiful coral you can find in the Caribbean, along with a little parrotfish. Some of the forest, very thick, very green. The national flower is the Brassavola digbyana. It's an orchid. And this person here is raking some coffee beans in the sun. Here is at the Pico Bonito National Park. See the mountains above the clouds here. And some bananas being hung out, ready to get shipped out. Another really beautiful Maya ruin. And Copan. And a head that was found in Copan. Oh, the absolutely gorgeous Mayan ruins here in this city. Very mysterious and old. Some of the Spanish explorations. You can see Columbus came here and sailed along the coast. Olid just came straight here. And Cortez came down from Mexico to conquer. Here's a lampiera with lampiera on it. This guy's mining for gold. And here's a map of the United Provinces of Central America. And this was the guy that was fighting to keep it together. His name was Francisco Morazan. He was really enthusiastic about it. He did not get his wish. Here's a banana plantation. This was a dictator that controlled Honduras. His name was Tiburcio Correas Andino. Another picture from the football war. And some Nicaraguan soldiers training in Honduras. And these are high school teachers on strike. It says in 2002. And this was the president when this book came out. His name was Ricardo Maduro. This is the old presidential palace in Tegucigalpa. It's now a museum. And here's another picture of Ricardo Maduro. This is where the legislative branch of the government meets. The Hall of the National Congress, it says. And this would be where the Supreme Court meets. Let's take a look at Honduras's flag. Grab a pencil. It says, the flag of Honduras came into use on February 16th, 1886. It has 3 horizontal stripes. The upper and lower stripes are blue, and the middle stripe is white. 5 blue stars are in the middle of the white stripe, arranged in an X pattern. The stars represent Costa Rica, El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, and Nicaragua, the members of the former United Provinces of Central America. If you're trying to figure out the order that I'm going in, I'm just going to leave it at that. The order the countries I'm going in. Very interestingly phrased right there. This guy's casting his vote. And this is a rally for the Liberal Party. Honduras is like a few other countries in the Western world where there's a very dominant Liberal Party, a very dominant Conservative Party, and they basically go back and forth. Once one side falls out of favor, the other side rises to power, and repeat over and over. Here's a very wonderful face. It says she's a homeless lady, though. That's really sad. And here's a lady selling some vegetables. Like I said, a very poverty-stricken country. Here's another picture of their money, the Lempira. And here are some people working to make some clothes in a factory in Honduras. Resources map, you can see a lot of the things that are grown and animals raised. But you can see all the green there. That's just forest. And here are some coffee beans. And tons of bananas getting shipped out. And this is apparently how a lot of people catch rides in Honduras. It's a little uncomfortable. And this is how people catch rides in the jungle on their little burros and mules there. Says this lady selling some newspapers. And here's another wonderful face. I like his hat. And even more fantastic faces. I like this one. Very sweet. And here we can see some very colorful, very beautiful traditional dresses. I really like them. Reminds me of, like, you know, the Disney Cinderella that the mice wear. It looks like that. And here's how people get around the rivers in the Mosquito Coast on these boats. So this is a Garifuna person out fishing. The Garifuna is an ethnic group that's descended from the Africans that were brought over during colonial times. You can see they're playing some drums here. And here you can see an ethnicity map of the native groups of Honduras. You can really see here what I was talking about. Pretty much all this area is populated by ethnic Hondurans. All the different groups that live there. Another picture of a cowboy. And here it looks like some girls are heading off to school. Got their little lunches and books. And some oxen working hard out in the field there. And here's a population map. You can see most people live here around the capital city, Tegucigalpa. And very sadly, air pollution is an issue here. So this clinic here is helping some children with their respiratory problems, helping them breathe some oxygen. Poor baby. Here's a really neat little statue of the Virgin Mary with baby Jesus. I wonder, is that supposed to be Jesus? It's very colorful, isn't it? I've never seen him look like that, if that is him. This is, I think... I don't want to mix my facts up. No, okay. I'm knee-deep in researching Nicaragua to do for you later this week, so I think I'm thinking of a church in Nicaragua, so this is not it. But this is a very famous church in Honduras where there's a religious relic there, and there are people lining up to pray to it, apparently. And here's some very beautiful children dressed up like angels for a St. Michael pageant. And these are some Lenca people on a traditional holiday, playing this flute there. It's called Conquest, it says. A ceremony of peace between neighboring villages. And here's a very wonderful photograph of a lady at Mass. This guy's chilling out here. Oh, he's at the Art Museum. It's the National Museum, I should say. And of course, football, soccer, as we say where I live, is like the biggest sport in Honduras. Here's some people watching a match out here. And then here's another picture from the football war. Oh, it's so peaceful. Kayaking out in the Caribbean. Lovely. And here is some native costume doing their dancing. Fantastic. We've got the National Art Gallery here in this very old looking building. And look at this beautiful painting. This is by Jose Antonio Velázquez. It's gorgeous. And this is the School of Fine Arts in Comayagüela. And some very gorgeous fabric being woven here. This piece of art is by Eduardo Galeano, and he paints pictures of Lenca people. And they're enjoying some music in the National Orchestra House. And playing some drums. Boom, 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 boom. This is Guillermo Anderson. He is like an extremely beloved musician from Honduras. Here's another wonderful face. And a little rural town, village, house. Adobe roof here. Are carrying some water, it looks like. And then how the other half lives in luxury homes. Come on, page. I think I might have skipped some other pages by accident, but totally fine. This person's making some bread out of cassava. Looks like a giant tortilla. And this is Ricardo Maduro when he got married while in office. Cute. It says these little girls are picking some squash. Oh, what a nice picture. And a nice caption. It says, life is slow and peaceful in rural Honduras. I like that. And I believe that's the end. It certainly is. So that's going to be it for tonight. Thank you so much for watching. I have another whispered video for you tomorrow about Honduras, so be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you found this video relaxing and educational, and I hope that you have a very good